we have vets that are graduating, but they're not going into large animal practices. We've lost 90% of our food and large animal veterinarians since World War II. This is a serious crisis that we're dealing with. And what are some steps? What are some options that we can take from a legislative perspective?
That was Montana State Representative Randyn Gregg of White Sulphur Springs, and today we talk with Randyn and Senator Wylie Galt about the critical shortage of rural veterinarians in Montana and what can be done to address it and improve the situation. We'll also look at some of the recent developments coming out of Washington, D.C., especially as it relates to regenerative agriculture, talk about inflation and where the egg economy sits today, and we're going to look at this cattle market. There's been a lot of volatility on the futures, but the video market for fall-delivered calves just outperforming all of our expectations. It all happens today on Next Year Country, brought to you by BNSF Railway. When it comes to getting grain to market, reliability matters. BNSF Railway's ongoing investment in safe, well-maintained infrastructure helps deliver that dependability for Montana producers. Well, thanks so much for joining us here on Next Year Country. I'm Colter Brown, joined here by Andy Schwab and Colton Young. If you've caught the last few episodes here, you know Colton has tried to come up with a name for the three of us. I'm not really sure why. What was the last one?
The Ag Amigos was last week.
Well, we did get another listener suggestion on that. This week it comes from Brett McCrae, of course. Our former farm broadcaster, Brett McCrae, texted me and he said, instead try flying burrito broadcasters.
I think he missed the point here.
Now that's a deep cut for fans of late 60s country alt-rock. The Flying Burrito Brothers. That's a deep cut. I think we got to keep trying. I'm not sure that's it.
I'll rein it in a little bit. I don't know if we're going to let Brett get away with that one.
I can't believe this has become a recurring segment.
Hey, man.
I let it happen this time. I guess it's my fault.
Yeah, you brought it up. I didn't even say anything.
Anyway, we're recording here right before the 4th, obviously. So, guys, what's on the docket? What do you like to do for the 4th of July? I know Andy just likes to watch pig races every single weekend.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be trying to celebrate America's 250th year, boys and girls. This is going to be a good year. Bear Creek pig races. If you guys have never been, that's my nighttime gig during the summertime for 4 nights a week. And boy, oh boy, is it ever fun. And we have some fun 4th of July celebrations lined up. A national anthem singer coming in this year for the 3rd and 4th. It's going to be a packed house. I think last year on the 3rd of July, we had 600 people there.
Wow.
And it is... it's standing room only at that point, if you can imagine.
And there are pig and pork puns for days from Andy Schwab. You'll love it.
We do not have enough time on this podcast for that. And I'll be where I've spent every 4th of July since I was born, in Red Lodge at the Home of Champions Rodeo. We've got a heck of a lineup here for some rodeo contestants coming in and looking forward to that. It's always a busy but such a fun week, and get to celebrate the 250th there.
Colton's kind of underselling his role there. He is a major role in the Red Lodge Rodeo, planning it out all year long. You're working on the rodeo.
It is, yeah. We our committee took a kind of a turn here this last year, so I somehow ended up as the secretary of the rodeo committee. But it's a lot of work goes into it. I don't think it gets underscored a little bit about how much it takes to put on a PRCA sanctioned event. But there's a lot of volunteers that help out and do it, and it's going to be a heck of a year this year. So we're definitely looking forward to that. We're already sold out on the 4th, so good luck. If you need tickets, you're not going to find them anywhere. Going to be a packed house, expecting over 7,000 there for the 4th.
Holy cats.
Wow.
Well, I'm disappointed I won't be able to be there. We're going to Roundup for their big community event there for the 4th, the parade. And, of course, Tanya Tucker and... I can't remember who the other
Cooper Allen?
Cooper Allen. That's
yeah.
right. Yeah. So we're going to go see some friends and do that. And I don't know. Kayla thinks we ought to get in the cornhole tournament. I'm thinking there's better things that I can use my talents for.
Might have to call the Lackmans up to
I was just going to
see
see what show was going on.
Yeah, get Joe and Scott Lackman there maybe. But anyway, so that's a little bit of what we've got going on this weekend. Hope everyone has a happy 4th. Colton, what do you got to talk about here today as far as ag news?
Yeah, we're kicking off the week. A couple of ag headlines, but first we want to thank Cameron Bumgardner at Two Gun Western Apparel. Of course, he joined us on the podcast episode last week. Just an honest guy. He's really doing it right. But Two Gun Western Apparel serves the agriculture and Western lifestyle with all of your apparel and custom branding needs. Be sure to visit Cameron and Two Gun at twogunwesternapparel.com. At the end of last week, we saw a big push from from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, U.S. Health Human Service Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr., and President Trump. President Trump did sign an executive order kind of pushing regenerative agriculture and more incentives for producers. And, you know, we've seen a lot of talk this year about the Farm Bill, the Working Families Tax Cuts Act that was passed last year. There continues to be a push around E15 sales and biofuel and the domestic production of that. And of course, we also see the regenerative practices pushing the Make America Healthy Again movement and kind of trying to rely less on chemicals to improve human health. That's had its own controversy on its own. But Health Secretary Kennedy Jr. and Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins, they pushed a regenerative practice and movement last week and also announced the feedstock rule, which is going to incentivize producers to use regenerative practices within the biofuel supply chain using corn, soybeans, sorghum, and canola. Currently, there's over 6 billion bushels of corn used annually for ethanol production, with 60% of farmers using at least one regenerative practice. Soybeans, similar, they were about 70% of those farmers already use one of those regenerative practices. So I think just trying to make more of a push and focus on that to improve soil health, efficiency, adjust those input costs, and try to push that Make America Healthy Again movement as well. But curious what your thoughts were on seeing that press release.
Well, I was going to ask you the same thing. Yeah, but what do you really think about this?
A lot of fancy words.
Yeah,
you know, it looks good on paper. What does it really mean? It's tough to say. It's one of those that you can see their thought process. You can see where they want it to go. And as we all know, you know, input costs are really high right now, and we're losing farm ground each and every day, and we're gaining more people on the planet. So somebody has to feed them. So I understand the need for pushing regenerative practices and improving our efficiency. But again, it's a lot of talk, but what are the actual actions that can come out of the executive order and the conversation?
Well, one of the things I think of, knowing producers in the regenerative ag space, like, you know, Roger and Betsy Enderlin or Kevin Halverson, some of those guys that are really doing some cool stuff, they're not doing it because the federal government's incentivizing them to do so.
No.
They're doing it because it works on their place and they've seen it and they're able to stock more, do whatever. So it's interesting to see that the government get engaged in this, and especially when we see such tough times in the farm economy. I wonder what scale are we operating at? Like, do we want to help all the farmers or just the ones that fit kind of what the MAHA movement does? I'm not trying to be critical here, but it seems like we're a little bit picking winners and losers in this space, but in a relatively small program in the scope of USDA. But I think it's interesting, especially when they talk about looking at alternative strategies for crop protection tools. Yeah. That raises the hair on the back of the necks of conventional farmers, which the vast majority are, of course. So what does that mean? I think they've walked back a lot of the MAHA movement from the first report we saw that really did come after some of what we use in crop protection tools, glyphosate, things like that. But I don't think there's cause for concern here. What I'd like to see is maybe some research. If we're going to push regenerative agriculture, why
and what?
Yeah,
what specifically? What are those? Because they just it's just
such a large level.
Practices. Yeah. Regenerative practice. Well, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of regenerative practices,
and we know it works. I mean, we had Roger Enderlin on the podcast last fall, and amazing to hear the things he's doing, but trying to extrapolate that out to a government program that works industry-wide, I would struggle to do that.
I remember hearing, I think it may have been Dave McEwen, he said, if I hear the word sustainable, I'm going to just get, well, I won't say
you can't direct quote Dave McEwen.
Yeah, can't direct quote Dave McEwen. But he said exactly what you just said, Colter. They're doing this already. It's not that they're doing it to fit some buzzword of sustainable. It's what they do on a day-to-day basis. And to me, it's going to be interesting, too, to see if this government program, you know, is this a shift of CRP to regenerative? You know, are they going to, is this going to work well enough where we can, you know, stop worrying about putting all these acres in CRP and start making it more regenerative? I wouldn't mind seeing that myself personally, but.
Yeah, interesting point for sure. But according to the announcement, there's $700 million available for the regenerative pilot program through the USDA. So there's a hefty amount of funds available out there, and curious to see, you know, what comes from that. Of course, we all know that farmers and ranchers are already doing so much and are the best stewards of the land. So curious to see how that ties into the federal program. We'll keep you informed, I guess, on how that goes. But another fun headline here this week, of course, every year this time, right before the 4th of July, the American Farm Bureau Federation does a volunteer survey to see just what the cost of the 4th of July average party across America is going to be and the effects that agriculture has on that. So in this year's voluntarily survey, the average cost to have 10 guests, a 4th of July cookout, is about $73.82. So just over $7 a person, which is up 4% from last year, but that's fairly consistent with the annual inflation rate. Some of the highlights that they have that they showed in the report is, of course, ground beef prices. They're up significantly, up 5.5% from last year alone. Fruits and veggie trays, they're up about 12%. Hamburger buns up 7%. But the good news, guys, your potato salad is going to be cheaper because egg prices are down from the avian flu last year. So
that's a place we could save at our house. We could just leave the potato salad and then we save a few bucks.
I had a special one for you. Pork and beans up 37 cents. So gonna have to ask for a raise at the pig races next year.
Pig races. Actually, Bear Creek does not serve any pork products whatsoever. Believe it or not, the slow pigs do get to go back with all the other fast pigs too. But I think I'm going to be supporting this on the boats. What my plan is to support this because we're going to be on the lake on the 3rd and the 4th as well. So
nice.
We got ourselves a little boat grill now, and so we're going to be contributing to that. Hopefully, we can keep our food costs under $73 for all 10 people that are going to be on the boat. But
and the boat from catching on fire, that would be bad too.
I got this special little grill that sits on the outside of the boat, and
what could go wrong?
The food costs under $73. I wonder what the Coors Light cost is on that boat.
Problem.
Might be more than $73.
This is just must be food only. There's no beverage included in that. But to bring that up, I did pull a couple extra facts really fast. Just the effects that agriculture and the 4th of July have with each other. Roughly 150 million hot dogs are consumed on the 4th. Of course, nobody knows where a hot dog comes from, so I'll leave you up to guess that. But there are over 375 million hamburgers consumed on the 4th of July. And for all of our barley growers, over 68 million cases of beer consumed on the 4th of July.
Well, and I think to take this home a little bit, I mean, I was surprised to see you said 4% was the cost up from last year.
Yep, up 4%.
I thought it would be higher than that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure.
So
I thought
doesn't seem like a heck of a lot to me, but you have to remember, take this back to the farm gate, and the farmer gets what, 6 or 8 cents on the dollar?
I think
on
it's
the retail
down
dollar.
To 4 now. But yeah.
And how much have the costs increased on the farm in the last year?
Definitely more than 4%.
Well, the price
in the
of
last
grain
4
is
months.
down from where it was a year ago. Now the cattle side obviously looks a lot better, as Andy's going to tell us later on in the program here. But there's sure challenges in the farm economy. The food costs more, but the farmer is not more profitable.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, that's this week's headlines. Again, of course, brought to us by Two Gun Western Apparel.
And we're going to get into our interview as well here very shortly. As we got to say thank you to Montana Farm Bureau Federation. They're leading Montana agriculture towards a future with prosperous ag economy and thriving rural communities. Now become an advocate with Montana Farm Bureau Federation and help protect the future of Montana agriculture. Learn more at mfbf.org.
Well, now we're joined by a couple of state legislators from Montana. We're lucky to have with us State Representative Randyn Gregg from White Sulphur Springs and State Senator Wylie Galt. Of course, Wylie, a former Speaker of the House and rancher from Martinsdale. Appreciate you both climbing on with us. You know, as I look at the view behind you a little bit, kind of gray out there, looks a little wet maybe. Wylie, what the last couple of days been like in your country?
Yeah, we're looking at getting close to 2 inches over the little more than 48 hours. Our country definitely needed it. Said we still had green grass, but it was really starting to turn and brown in places, and this is a good shot in the arm.
Well, darn good to see. And Randyn, you're literally in the middle of horseshoeing. I think you stopped to get on this call with us. Where are you at today?
That's correct. Yep, I'm actually down here in Big Sky working with an outfitter down here, and they are getting plenty of rain, and the rivers are looking full right now, which is a very positive sign.
It's good to see, especially with where we were at a month ago here, and things were looking pretty rough across Montana, across the West, and boy, I won't say it's turned around everywhere. There are tough spots, but boy, it sure looks a lot better. So thank you both for joining us here. And to kind of preface our conversation a little bit, one of the many challenges, I guess, that's facing agriculture in Montana and really across the West is the shortage of veterinarians. And that's not a new issue by any stretch. It's been that way for a while, but particularly in our rural areas and large animal vets, there aren't enough to go around, and we're working them pretty hard, of course. But you as state legislators have been engaged on this issue, knowing how critical vets and animal health are to not just the ag industry, but really the economy in Montana in general, and really trying to take some steps to improve that and really focus on the future of how we deal with these animal health issues. So maybe just start there. And Wylie, I'll start with you, but why did you decide to bring attention to this issue and bring it to the legislature?
Yeah, I think, I had my rancher hat on the time, and as all of us know that are in the ranching industry, we couldn't make it without vets. I mean, those late night calls for the C-sections, the prolapses, to just the wealth of information they can be when you're looking at different vaccine programs for marketing, or just as many different operations they see, that they're just a great wealth of information that we can use. And if we're to lose that, man, ranching would be tough.
Randyn, jump in here. I mean, how serious is the shortage of rural veterinarians in Montana?
Very serious. And something I'm blessed with in my line of work as a farrier. I get to work with vets all day, every day. And actually working with a vet today, we're sedating horses. But, there's areas we get out to 30, 40, 50 miles away is the closest veterinarian. And I'll get asked questions that are above my pay grade. I'm like, let's talk to the vet about this. But we can't get that vet out right away. And God bless them. They're doing the very best job they can. But it started out as something that Senator Galt and I knew anecdotally. But then you start diving into the facts and figures. And you're like, wow, this is a serious crisis that we're dealing with. And what are some steps? What are some options that we can take from a legislative perspective?
And mention some of those facts and figures. Folks listening may have read your opinion editorial that you guys put on our website that we were happy to help share. And I read, was it 17 counties across Montana are critically underserved for large animal veterinarians?
That's correct, Colter. And when we say critically underserved, that means a veterinarian call between 1 to 3 hours away. And we're looking at, a cow to vet ratio of 8 to 1 in some of these counties, especially along the High Line. Now, there are certain areas like central Montana where it's not quite as acute, but it's still at crisis levels. But 17 of these counties are in absolute crisis level, and nearly, say, about 500 counties across the nation, across 47 different states, are in similar situations.
And Wylie, as a producer yourself, I mean, you guys run enough cows, you could employ a couple of vets probably at certain times of the year. But talk about the threat that poses to ranchers across Montana if you can't get veterinary service when you need it.
Yeah, I mean, and when you're looking at these prices, it doesn't take many calves before that really starts adding up. I mean, if you have a C-section that you can't get someone there and you end up losing the calf and the cow, I mean, it doesn't take many of those before it really starts adding up and hitting that bottom line.
Well, and it's the bottom line of not just the individual rancher, but our communities as well. Because, we're talking about a small business in a rural community, but boy, the impact of the cattle industry on Montana's economy is huge. And if we don't have veterinarians, it starts costing everybody.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. And I mean, I think as we also continue to push to get young people back into agriculture and bring them back onto these places, and keeping vets as new producers start coming in is going to just be vital.
Well, I think, the big thing too, you guys talked really well about why it matters to agriculture, but we got to kind of understand where this is coming from as well. I guess, Randyn, I'll start with you on that. Probably the big question, where's this coming from? Why are we so short on rural veterinarians?
So a lot of it is we have our baby boomer generation retiring. We have vets that are graduating, but they're not going into large animal practices. If you look at some of these statistics, that blew my mind away. We've lost 90% of our food and large animal veterinarians since World War II, 90%. And they're not going to areas like central Montana, like the High Line, like the Big Hole region. A lot of these folks are going to Bozeman, Kalispell, Whitefish, and when you can, you can make $30,000 or $40,000 extra dollars right off the start, especially when you're, to go to vet school, you're already sometimes $400,000 in some cases in debt, and you can make a little bit more money and go to a 9 to 5 as opposed to, as Senator Galt said, work on our prolapse uterus when it's 10 below, preg checking 500 cows, or when I have to call somebody for a rodeo horse that's calking at 3 a.m. in the morning. It sounds romantic right from the start, but you get into it and it gets tiresome and can get lonely being in rural Montana. And so those are some of the reasons that are causing some of the shortages that we're dealing with. And we got to try to rectify that in any way possible.
Wylie, I'll kind of piggyback off of that question as well to you. I know in my hometown, Powell, Wyoming, it seemed like we had several vets right there in town, but not all of them were large animal vets. Are you seeing, a lot of these kids coming out of the vet school just taking on small animal practices versus large and small?
Yeah, and I mean, how can you blame them? Do you want to play with dogs and kittens all day or get ran over by a cow? So I mean, it's a real toss up there. So that's where we're coming from with the more incentive base. Is we'll help you cover some of that debt. And as we all know, you get in these small town Montana areas, you tend to fall in love with them. So we incentivize people to show up to become a part of that community. They put down roots, and then you just added a very valuable person to these small communities.
Well, I think that's a good point to dive into the legislation you introduced in the 2025 session, House Bill 860. Talk about that bill and what it was designed to accomplish.
What this HB 860, what this would have done was provide up to $100,000 for veterinarians to go serve in rural and underserved areas of Montana. And they could use that for paying down costs. We were even talking about maybe even some startup costs for their businesses. But it was $100,000, and you had to serve in these areas for up to 4 years. So it would have been $25,000 a year. And that was the way we were going to try to incentivize. And once you've served in an area for about 4 years, you tend to stick with the area. Whether that's central Montana, the Highland, wherever it may be. And with veterinarians, they can be the bedrock to a lot of these rural communities. And so that was one thing we were trying to incentivize. It was based off of the Kansas model, which has a 94% success rate. So we weren't starting from scratch. And a lot of these other states, a lot of these farm states like in Iowa, like in Kansas, have programs like these in place. And we're like, okay, why not Montana? Especially when agriculture in total is a $5.27 billion industry in our great state.
What did Kansas do that made it work so well? I mean, you said 94% success rate?
They targeted certain areas of the state. They worked with their university system, which is something that we don't quite have yet. We're working on that with Rocky Vista University, but they worked with Kansas State, with their universities to get this across the finish line. Now, we do have a great partner, I believe, in Washington State with the WWAMI program, but we would like to keep it in-house if possible. And if we can do that, I think we have a winning combination.
I'm curious, what were some of the conversations had in the House and in the Senate as well when you were proposing this bill, talking about the crisis at hand? What were some of the conversations you were hearing from others in Helena? And I don't know if there would be any backlash on this. I think it's pretty obvious this is an issue across the entire state, but curious what some other thoughts were when circling around the House Bill 860.
We were blessed. We had some great support. All the major ag groups, from stock growers to Farm Bureau to Farmers Union, supported us on this. We actually had support from across the aisle. And I'm going to quote our new federal district court judge, Bill Mercer. He said it was the best dog and cat bill he'd ever seen. And so even though we're dealing with horses and cows. But, there was a little bit of a fiscal note that we're going to be working on. We're going to be working with our partners on this to get that down so we can actually address this workforce issue, which is what it is. It's not a left issue. It's not a right issue. This is a workforce issue. It's a rural Montana issue that we care about.
Is that why it did ultimately fall short? There's a little bit of cost onto it. To me, it seemed a little bit of a timing issue, just getting down to the session and maybe just not enough time to really underscore this is one we have to keep in there.
Certainly. And that is one of the issues. We got into this a little bit late. I was a freshman, so I'm still learning the ropes here. And so we did introduce it a little bit late. I think we introduced it a little bit earlier. We probably would have had a little bit of a better luck with this. But that's why we're starting early. Let's get this ball rolling. Let's address a real issue that's affecting real Montanans and get this over the finish line.
So looking forward then, looking to the 2027 session, obviously you're already doing the work, getting the word out here. How else do we engage the ag community and really the state at large to make sure that when the session starts, we know this is a critical topic and we're going to get it done?
Since the bonus of COVID is we kind of at the legislature jumped into the 21st century with technology. So if you go to the legmt.gov, when this bill is up for a hearing, so you can pop in remotely, which would be great. I remember when I was speaker and we were first doing it, we had a bill in a committee, and we called on the person that was next in line for Zoom testimony, and his wife popped on and said, he's out pulling a calf right now, but if you come back, I'll make sure he's back in here. So it has allowed, a lot of ranchers, that are in the thick of it in calving is usually when we're in session, that they can just hop online and instead of spending hours driving to Helena back and forth, they can just pop on their computer and say, this is something we really need to see in our area.
Is there a way to get the university system to engage here? I know we don't have a vet school at Montana State, but I know there's a bunch of kids that they go through their undergrad there, go to Washington State, and then hopefully we bring them back. And then you mentioned Rocky Vista University. Hopefully that's an avenue. Can we have the support from the education community too?
Rocky Vista is more than happy in helping. And then I haven't reached out to with the new leadership changes at kind of both the universities recently. I don't know if they've gotten their feet quite underneath them to start delving into the little projects moving in and out. But I'm hoping as we get closer, we can start engaging with them.
As we think about this, and really I think of, the young veterinarian fresh out of school, couple $100,000 in debt here. And if they do get in an underserved community, maybe there is a veterinarian looking to retire. One of the things that they have to do is not only practice animal health, but now you're a business owner too, and you probably have a couple of employees. It's a lot that we're asking these kids to take on. So it's really, it's a whole community-wide effort to make them successful, but also just the business end of it can be challenging for a new veterinarian.
Yeah, definitely. No one's a big fan of paperwork. I'm sure there's not a rancher out here who was, no, you think I'm going to stay inside and do some paperwork instead of go work.
So, obviously in this last session, there was some progress made. It fell a little short, but as you head into the session in 2027, what's the ideal goal here? I know, there's obviously long-term goals, but there's also some short-term goals, and I know you're working currently right now to address those and kind of get all the ducks in a row. But we'll start with you, Randyn. What are those kind of first steps that you want to see happen right away so we can kind of keep the ball rolling?
We're already seeing that right now. We're bringing attention to a matter that is that we've been dealing with for a long time, but we actually need to address this. So one thing I'm going to ask all of you and all of your listeners is politely and respectfully talk to your fellow legislators that represent you. Hey, this is a bill. This is an issue that we need to get done for rural Montana. So talk to them about that, but do it in a polite and respectful manner. I think we're all sick and tired of people being uncivil. So reach out to your legislators, know who they are, talk to them, and educate your fellow colleagues across the state of Montana. Whether it's people that are not involved in ag, this is an issue that affects all of us. Agriculture on any given year is the number one industry in Montana. It's the pillar that kind of keeps us all together. So let's get that across the finish line. And then, again, education. Just talk to your neighbors.
And I started more on the policy side of it as kind of my step one. It was actually funny enough. I had the Speaker of the House come out and help me nightcap for a few weeks this year. And we were sitting there with my vet 5:30 in the morning doing a C-section. And we spent the whole C-section talking about this and asking her, what would you need to bring more young vets, underneath you to help them there? And, it said, talk to your vets and see what would be, the big incentive that would get them out of college to come out, into these rural central Montana areas. And, I'm still in conversations with her. We're still trying to work out the details of how to best incentivize. We constantly, take different legislation from different states and try to put it here. You kind of get square peg, round hole sometimes. So we're just trying to shave the corners of that square peg and get it to really work in Montana.
Senator Galt, I might be stepping, a little further away from Montana and taking it to a broad spectrum, a macroeconomic, if you will. But should we also be talking to our national representatives and U.S. senators to see if there's a fix on the national level or additional support that we could get from maybe the USDA? Or do you know of any support from the USDA or the national level that these young veterinarians could be looking for in a rural community?
You actually hit the nail on the head of the conversations that Representative Gregg and I have been having recently. It's our budget's looking better than we thought, but it's still going to be a little tight this next session. So we have been talking about using federal money and trying to see if we can pull it off as a pilot project in Montana, then other states can follow us with some of that federal money and get a little help, that it's not just a state having to tackle this issue by itself.
Well, Wylie, I think it's also important to highlight that while we're having this conversation, the U.S. cattle industry is facing its biggest animal health issue in, 20 years. Well, every day we're talking on the radio about this New World screwworm issue. And so we need our vets now more than ever. Now, hopefully it's not something we end up dealing with in the north, but this could become an even more dire situation if things proceed further north faster than we think they are going to with the screwworm.
Agreed there. And, our biggest advocates when it comes to that's going to be vets in these small communities, because if you see that hit, the first person I'd call a vet and be like, well, what's this going to do if I'm buying a steak with it? And if they have, all that information and more vets around to explain that you don't have to worry about it at the end user. It's just more what's happening to the live animal.
Well, and lastly, I guess, as we think about success within this program, I know you're trying to communicate that to your counterparts in the legislature, but to me, if in 10 years you've added half a dozen new practices across the state, that is huge success. It don't take much to really move the needle here.
Yeah, you are right there. It's luckily we got a pretty good low bar for success, and I mean overwhelming success. I mean, there'd be just a handful of communities that if they got one vet in there, they'd just be tickled to death.
Well, before we let you guys go, pull back from the veterinary issue just for a second. And as we think about the 2027 session, any priorities specifically for the ag industry that we need to keep on our radar, that farmers and ranchers need to be aware of? I know you guys have a heck of a lot of work to do before we get to that point, but you're already working on it, obviously.
No, I think if we focus on this vet issue, that's a huge issue. We also have some other issues that we're dealing with as well. A shortage of vet techs. That's also an issue that we're dealing with. And with agriculture being the number one industry in Montana, with cattle prices being the way they are, we need to make sure that we take care of our rural folks. And as many of us already know, food security is national security. This is why it's a critical issue for Montana. So those are some of the things that we're really going to be focusing on. We're going to be hitting home. And again, this is an issue. I think there's appetite across the board to get this fixed and figured out. And that's what Senator Galt and I are going to be working on. Issues that just everyday rural Montanans.
And I'd say the two that I'm kind of coming into this next session really working on is one being property taxes. That I think after last session with the way that flipped around, we need to get certainty in this, and especially for these large operations of ranches and, passing on to the next generation, having certainty when it comes to property taxes is going to be a big one. And the other one I'm up into my eyeballs in literally is exempt wells. I mean, it's been a 20-year battle we've been working on this. And what we need to, get some parameters around it, get some certainty, be able to not have any worries that if you have a pasture go dry that you need to go punch a well for a stock tank to have the ability to do that. And also have, the backside of protecting the senior water right users in the more densely populated areas that they're not going to start seeing their streams go down. It's a tough cookie to crack, but we're trying to work through it.
Well, there's no easy answers to either of those, but appreciate what you both are doing to carry the water for Montana agriculture, and hopefully we're talking here in 6 months with some positive movement on this bill. So thank you both for taking the time with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, that was a great conversation with representatives and senators. We appreciate them joining us. But now we're going to wrap up our episode and head over to the markets. But first, we'd like to thank Western Ranch Supply. Western Ranch Supply is Montana owned and operated, proudly serving farmers and ranchers with quality products and trusted expertise for over 70 years. Trusted by generations because they're built by generations. Andy, I know last week was an impressive week in the markets alone, but even in the auction market, of course, in our region, Northern Livestock Video kicked off their summer special, so we'll kick it over to you for some highlights.
Yeah, the early summer special selling over 48,000 head in that offering, and wow, what some great prices that we've seen, record-setting prices. Honestly, if you look at them, just looking at some of the highlights that you can see on our website, northernag.net, 500 to 550 pound steer calves averaging $540 a head. Light 6-weight steers averaging $482, 7-weight steers on the lighter end, $445. You get into the heifers, a little bit less of a head count there, but light 5-weight heifers averaging $490, some even getting over $5 a pound. Light 7-weight heifers averaging $405 on the average. If you go down to the USDA's website as well and kind of look over year comparison, now this early summer special last year had almost 68,000 head in it. This year has 48,000 head. I think we can kind of take a grain of salt with that quote because we also saw that additional Northern Livestock video auction earlier in, what was that, June? Earlier in June. That was
May. It was in May.
Yeah, in May. That had, I think, 13,000 head on it. So a little bit less that we may have saw due to that earlier sale. But one thing that the USDA reported last year, kind of in their commentary, was that sellers they centered around the Canadian buyers, and they were willing to do things extra for those Canadian buyers. This year, they were just talking about the record high prices. Some of those heavyweight yearlings achieving $3,700 a head. Some of the unweaned calves topping out at $3,400 a head. Just great times for some of these cattle producers to be able to enjoy some of these higher prices as much as they can anyways.
Now you got to hit your music button. Dun dun dun. Speculating with Colter Brown.
No, it's just as good as it's ever been. Frankly, I'm shocked it is so good. If you'd have asked me back in May what I thought this done, I'd say we'd be higher than last year, but I would have said 5 to 10%. You pull the averages from last year, look at this sale. We're 33% higher on the calves. Yearling's up 24%. So we're just through the roof. Amazed to see the level of demand that continues to hang in there. And now with the rain that we've seen here over the last month for most of Montana, wish it was getting to our guys in eastern Wyoming a little more. But boy, things are looking pretty good in the cowboy business.
Well, that was one of my takeaways from the sale. Of course, we try to track as much of that sale as we can in between our programs in and out of the studio and whatnot. But I think all the conversations we had late last fall and early spring, of course, you talked with Ty Thompson about the sale, Andy, but they were saying, we know drought's a concern. And we understand if you have to market early, but we appreciate if you don't. Try to stay the course. And I think a lot of what we saw in this last sale were the repeat customers, the buyers, the sellers. They tried to stay their course. And of course, I think a big thanks to that is the rain showers that we've seen over the last month. So it was good to see not a lot of different people consigning in this sale that they don't normally due to the drought conditions. Of course, there was a few, but not as much, I guess, as I was anticipating early on.
One thing that Ty did say during that conversation I had with him, which you can watch that entire conversation on our website as well, was that several of the lots, they had 10 maybe plus buyers on each of those lots. And you and I, Colton, as auctioneers, if there's 10 buyers on one item, that makes for a great time as an auctioneer. It makes for great prices, obviously, as well.
Yeah, clearly shows the demand was there, and I know they highlighted it a bunch. There was some traditional phone bids on a lot of those lots, seeing it on the internet, in-house. So overall, just a tremendous sale and another great start to the summer video sale run for all of our producers in our region.
What do you think? Are there any signs of retention? I mean, a month ago, we were saying, it's so dry, there's no way. But now the grass situation can be a little better in some areas. I know there were less heifers on this sale. Yeah. Certainly yearling heifers a lot less.
Yeah, on the feeder cattle for the USDA report, 2025 number said that 30% of the offering of the feeder cattle last year were heifers. This year, 23% were heifers on the feeder cattle offering this year. I don't know, Colter, because there was, as we mentioned, there was a lot of cattle that were pulled forward to that May sale. So is that number, apples to apples, or is it apples to oranges? It's a little tough to tell, but certainly could be a point of these producers are, they got that good rain in May, and so now they see that they have some grass. They can hold back some of these heifers potentially.
I asked you because I didn't want to answer the question. But no, I don't think. A couple inches of rain we sure appreciate, but I don't think it's changed the course. I mean, we've already seen a lot of cows cold. We've seen a lot of pairs move. Heifers go early. It's good to see the moisture, but especially where we're shaping up from a feed cost and availability standpoint, I don't think this is the year that we're going to do it. The other thing that I'm looking at is the feed yard side of this equation. The guys that are paying $3,000 for a calf. How long can that go on? I mean, we'll talk about the price of feed here in a little bit, but boy, I think cost of gain at, let's say, $1.10,
close to it now.
Where are these calves breaking even? I mean, they'll come off probably April, May, June next year. That board's sitting in the high 230s right now, and they're probably breaking even 260s, 270.
Yeah,
there's a little bit of betting on the come happening right now, so we'll see what happens. I mean, feed costs are going to play heavily into that. The beef demand has held in, and that's the X factor in this whole discussion.
It definitely is held in on the demand perspective, but like you said, Colter, I think the break even, those margins, they keep getting tighter and tighter as we go on. And at what point do they give?
Well, and right now, I think we're talking about feeding margins several $100s a head profitable right now.
Yeah.
Now, the Packer is obviously the one that's over a barrel at this point, but feed yards are profitable right now. At these prices, you wonder how long will that sustain for.
And that's another thing I want to bring up today, too, is the corn prices that we've been watching as of lately. Since a month ago, when they kind of had that surge, they had the Strait of Hormuz shut down and the Iran conflict, the peak of it anyways, we were looking at corn being around $4.91 a bushel, almost getting into that $5 per bushel price. Now it's back at $4 a bushel. If you look at the Wyoming cash bid, the latest one that we saw, it was averaging right at $4 a bushel as well, kind of matching what the board was putting out there. But I know corn's not the only input that these cattle producers are facing or that have to, put in, but corn is one of the major ones. And certainly could be offset by higher hay costs this year. Hay costs have certainly increased quite a bit this year, but corn prices coming down for a month straight. That's got to give a little bit of these feed yards like just a little bit of a sigh of relief.
Especially when there's so much of it too. I know we'll see the USDA acreage report come out this week, and expectations and predictions have kind of been all over the board. I think mostly what I've seen is they're expecting about 400,000 acres pulling off of corn, transitioning over to soybeans, but still just under 95 million acres. It's incredible.
Well, and that'd be 3-4 million acres less than last year. So you'd think we'd see these corn stocks tighten, but the trade obviously isn't too worried about it. So keeps the cost of gain affordable. Unfortunately, keeps a lid on wheat prices that are going to follow corn pretty closely. So it just takes time. All depends on the weather. Sounds pretty favorable in the Midwest right now, so that may keep trendline yields, and we're going to produce a lot less wheat in the U.S. this year, so that may provide some upward support here over the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, that acreage report also expecting, I thought they said 43 million acres of total U.S. wheat, which is almost unchanged from the prospective plantings report that we saw, but curious to see how that's going to shake the markets here a little bit.
Yeah, but it's still like the lowest ever, right? Lowest.
In decades. I don't know. I don't remember the official date of lowest wheat production for what they
I think
were
it's the
saying.
lowest wheat acreage on record.
Acreage,
not
right.
production. I
Yeah,
think it's
okay.
production would be, I can't remember, 30 or 40 years in production, but it's the lowest acreage on record.
Yep. Which, hey, I mean, pat on the back to those wheat breeders. You know, they're producing that much more wheat with less acres.
You bet.
It's certainly, that part's working.
Well, thanks so much for that market update, Andy, and thank you for joining us with this conversation. A big thank you to Representative Randyn, Gregg, and Senator Wylie Galt for their insights. Hopefully we can have them on again. And with that, we'll let you enjoy your 4th. Stay clear of Bear Creek unless you love pig puns and Andy Schwab. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of Next Year Country. For the Northern Ag Network, I'm Colter Brown.